Now, Williams Wargames put a very interesting comment on one of my videos. He said, what would I be missing out on by going with White Box as opposed to one of the other OSR systems like Labyrinth Lord, OSR or Basic Fantasy? Now that's a very good question, because even within one system there are a lot of vagaries and confusions sometimes. So let's talk a little bit about some of the more well-known OSR games you can get. This is White Box, fantastic medieval adventure game. It is a complete game in this tiny book. All of the art within is by William McCausland, and James V. West designed the character sheet. It's a wonderful little book. You can read it in like half an hour and you've read the whole game, basically. It has race is separate to class, but certain characters who are dwarves, for instance, can choose between two classes, fighter or thief. Elves can either be fighters or magic users, but they can also choose to be an elf class, which is a fighter magic user that can only go to level 8 because the rest of the classes can go to level 10. And we've got halflings as well as an option. They can choose between fighter or thief, and humans can choose between fighter, thief, magic user or cleric. Nice thing about Swords and Wizardry and White Box is that there is one saving throw, so that's kind of nice. The attribute modifiers are not very high or low, so you go to +1 or -1. So if you look here, you go up to level 10 in most of the classes apart from the fighter, elf, mage character, and you get everything you need in this one book, all your equipment you want. You can have ascending armor class like 5th edition D&D, or descending armor class like very old school D&D, weapons and armor, advice about playing the game, simple rules for secret doors and things. You have a 1 in 6 chance of hearing a noise. Non-humans hear noise on a roll of 1 or 2 on a d6. Nice, simple rules to deal with everything. Initiative is both sides roll the d6 and the highest goes first, basically. There is an alternative combat system, but you can use advanced armor class or descending armor class, whichever you like. And it is a brutal game, but there is some mitigating healing, like binding wounds, an optional rule. Referees can allow characters to bind 1d6 hit points worth of wounds following a battle. This is of particular use in low magic campaigns or in adventures where none of the players has chosen to run a cleric. Note that the character can only recover HP lost during this particular battle. Recovered HP cannot cause a character to have more hit points than normal. So you've got that little thing, a bit like catching your breath in Shadows of Brimstone, which is a very neat little rule. It does have options for full set of saving throws instead of just the one. So you can play it like more old school D&D, or if you want to. But it provides the nice options. You've got all your spells you might want, and advice for running the game, encounter tables, plenty of monsters with some nice illustrations as well. And at the end, you get your treasure and magic items, things like that. It's a very, very neat game. There are a few covers available. For some reason, I have 3 of them. Great game, nice and simple, nice and straightforward, nice and streamlined, but it's got everything you need for a classic fantasy adventure. This is White Box Expanded Lore. I've had it printed out. It's available from Drive-Thru RPG, not very expensive, and it does contain loads of extra content you might want. If you want a more expansive collection of character classes, you can have that. You can be a half-orc or a gnome. It's got extra races you can be. And it's got feats you can add, and all these druid spells, and expanded rules for more incremental and impressive attribute bonuses. You can do checks for attribute checks, like you know how a lot of modern players say, can I do an intuition check on this thing, instead of saying, you know, what they're actually doing. But here are our checks. While travelling in the dungeon or in the wilderness, characters may perform various actions. This includes listening, finding secret doors, finding traps, unlocking doors. Whenever a character performs one of these actions, the referee secretly rolls a d6. A result of 1 or 2 means success. Anything above is failure. Some racial abilities and feats may modify these rolls. So if your players are ability check crazy, then they can do that, and that will keep them happy, hopefully. So loads of neat little content in there. Swords and Wizardry White Box is pretty much the same as White Box Fantastic Medieval Adventure Game. This is just a slightly neatened up and more streamlined version of this book, and as a consequence, anything released for White Box Swords and Wizardry will work perfectly well with White Box Fantastic Medieval Adventure Game. Any extra supplements like this, for example, this has other class options, magical items, bestiary, extra monsters, and a whole little campaign in this book. There are quite a lot of White Box supplemental books if you want those. Old School Essentials. I only got this physical book fairly recently. Now, Old School Essentials needs its own video, which I'm not going to do, but this is the Classic Fantasy version. This is based on Basic and Expert Dungeons and Dragons, but it also includes Ascending Armour class. It has some errors from here removed, so it's been tidied up. It is a restatement of the BX rules, and it cleans it up really well, and it highlights different rules in a really cool way. Like when I was reading through it, I was thinking, wow, I would have left that at the back of the book and not even consider it, but it's actually a really neat thing to be able to do. You know, it highlights, because of the way the book is laid out, it highlights particularly interesting things. You can have ascending or descending armor class in here. This book, the Rules Tome, Classic Fantasy Rules Tome, is a complete game. There is also an advanced fantasy version, which is basically the BX rules, but expanded to include all of the extra classes and monsters and spells that you would get in advanced Dungeons and Dragons. That's kind of the idea. And that brings us to Labyrinth Lord, because these two books sort of do the same thing. Labyrinth Lord is looking at a second edition coming soon, but this is a sort of a restatement of the Basic and Expert rules as well, but it is all descending armour class in this edition of Labyrinth Lord. What the second edition will be like, I don't know, but this is your BX rules basically. The classes, I think the levels go pretty high, 14, that kind of thing. So the levels in here are pretty similar to Old School Essentials. So you've got your classes going up to 14, and same in here. But this is all descending armour class. This adds the extra character options and extra monsters and things like that. So these two books give you the BX rules, but with advanced options and monsters and things, extra stuff. And this gives you the BX rules, really nicely laid out and organised with some gorgeous artwork. But the advanced version of this is sort of a different thing entirely. The advanced book contains two hardback books, the one for the player, the one for the games master, and they contain all of these and the extra advanced rules. But I'm a big fan of BX, and so I went for this one. So Basic and Expert. This is my nostalgia, and that brings me to mention OSRIC and For Golden Glory. I did have those two. I never used them. OSRIC is a sort of clone of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition, So it has odd initiative rules, as does for Golden Glory, which is a clone of 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. AD&D is not my nostalgia. I did play 2nd edition AD&D in the olden days, but I never really got attached to it. I always loved BX, so that's my thing. That's why I don't have OSRIC. OSRIC has really interesting and good dungeon generation tables in the back. So, you know, it's cool. If you like AD&D, it might be a good look for you, if you fancy having a look at that. For Golden Glory is a clone of 2nd edition AD&D. Lots of monsters in both of those and loads of character options and that kind of thing. So this is the original BX, a game that I had when I was a young scamp, and I still love to this very day. Basic Fantasy is also similar to BX, but it's very much its own game. Chris Gonnerman has taken all the inspiration from earlier D&D and just created his own game out of it. And the characters feel... I ran a campaign of this in 2020, and the characters feel quite substantial, like they can hold their own pretty well. And this is the 3rd edition rules, and these are the 4th edition rules. 4th edition is, rules-wise, it's very similar. There's not a big difference between these two editions at all. This contains way more stuff. I mean, extra monsters grew out of the old open game license debacle before Wizards of the Coast backed down. Work began on this 4th edition, but it turned out that yes, they could still include kobolds, so barklings became a thing. So alternate monsters that were created for to fend off the OGL crisis. Some of them ended up staying because people just liked them, and it's very much community driven, this game. Everything, every adventure, every supplement, every rulebook is available for free on PDF, and all of the books that are available in print are available at cost. So you are not spending a great money getting into Basic Fantasy, and it's a fantastic game. But let us go to Swords and Wizardry now. There's a new edition of Swords and Wizardry out. It is the rulebook has been tidied up. A few rules has been tweaked a little bit. That's the new edition of the Complete Rulebook. This is the old edition of the Complete Rulebook because I love this Errol Otis cover. And Swords and Wizardry is a great game. It's the first OSR game I really got into, and I used it for my first solo game. Again, this is very like White Box. It's just White Box is a simplified version, really. So in here you'll be able to do variable weapon damage, whereas all the weapons in White Box are rolled on a d6 for damage, and all the hit dice are d6, whereas in here they are the more traditional d8, and you have variable weapon damage. Lots of optional rules you can include if you want to, like different forms of initiative and things like that. So it's very much a toolkit. You know, you can pick which bits you want. Maybe it's not the tidiest layout. It's a little bit crazy sometimes. But I have the PDF of the new version of the Complete Rulebook, and that looks a bit tidier. But they're essentially the same game. But a lot of OSR games are moving away from the OGL, so they don't have to rely on Hasbro's magnanimity in perpetual... what's it? So there are plenty of great OSR games out there. Shadow Dark has its own refreshing twist on this. I've not gone in for Shadow Dark. It's a big old tome, and I'm veering towards little books. And these for me are more than enough classic fantasy. I mean, if you've got White Box, you have all the classic fantasy you need. If you've got basic fantasy, you've got all the classic fantasy you need. All these games are just great on their own. You don't need any of the others unless you obsessively collected them like I did. But these, for me, are all I will ever want. Not need. You only need one of them, really, but all I will ever want. Labyrinth Lord is my classic BX clone. Sword and Wizardry, I was very fond of that when I first got into it, and it's a great game. Old School Essentials is just gorgeous, full of wonderful artwork and a perfect BX clone, and but with ascending armor class, which everybody likes, most people anyway. White Box is a perfect classic fantasy game, nice and simple. Only goes to level 10 for most of the classes, so it keeps everything not super powered. Basic Fantasy is brilliant. The whole community ethos behind it and the non-profit attitude is just great. So these are just a few of some of the more well-known classic OSR games out there, and I hope I've been able to shed a little bit of light on the differences between them. And if there are any further questions about any differences between these games, do leave them in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer them. Not that I'm a super duper expert or anything, but I do love all these games and I'm very, very fond of them. But as I say, if you want a great classic fantasy game, have a look at any possible free versions on PDF. Have a read through and see which one you like best. Basically, you can look at all of these games for free in PDF format, in like a basic version of the rules or a full version of the rules for certain ones of the games, and you'll be able to get a feel for if those rules are right for you. And if you want to keep the free version, then you go for it. But yeah, you can have a look at the PDFs that are available for free, see if you like them, and perhaps buy the book of the one you like best.